Change is always happening, but no matter what changes in 5 years, there's one thing that will stay the same: the price of your internet. With the Xfinity 5-year price guarantee, you get 5 years of the most reliable Wi-Fi, with our best equipment included, for a price that stays exactly the same. Restrictions apply. New residential customers only. Taxes and fees extra and subject to change. Most reliable Wi-Fi based on OpenSignal Awards USA. Fixed Broadband Experience Report, August 2024.
They say to only bring what you can carry. So with the all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor, bring a lot. Like 3 dirt bikes, a few tents, an entire crew ready to make memories. A panoramic 24-inch display, and the confidence to push your limits. The all-new 2025 Ford Expedition Tremor.
Always consult the owner's manual before off-road driving. Know your terrain and trail difficulty and use appropriate safety gear. Max payload varies based on accessories and vehicle configuration. See label on door jamb for carrying capacity of a specific vehicle. Always properly secure cargo.
Hello, everyone. I'm Therese Bottomly, editor of the Oregonian and Oregon Live. This is Beat Check with the Oregonian. Today, I'm talking to watchdog reporter Ted Sickinger about his story from last month that exposed a bit of a loophole in the Oregon Lottery's rules. Ted, welcome back to Beat Check.
Thanks, Therese, for having me.
So, last month in July, you reported an interesting story about Oregon Lottery winners, and winners maybe in quotes there. Why don't you recap your main findings?
Okay, well, what we found was that there were, maybe a little background here. This really got set up as part of a fairly standard news gathering process. As listeners may recall, we had a huge Powerball winner, $1.3 billion back in March. So that win generated an enormous amount of interest, and we wanted to tell folks, we wanted to provide some context to that and tell our readers, how often Oregonians are hitting lottery jackpots, where that happens, et cetera, which retailers are frequently generating big prizes. And it turns out that one of our staffers, Mark Graves, had already requested a list of previous winners from the lottery. And I don't know if he was doing that for any particular news reason or it was just his personal interest, but he'd already been down this rabbit hole of reporting and noted to our editors that we had, a few individuals or, more than a handful of individuals who were winning large prizes with frequency that was suspicious. So when we had this big winner, I re-requested the updated list since the beginning of 2018 and began sorting the numbers. So Oregon, as it turns out, is one of 22 states that don't allow you to remain anonymous when you win a big lottery prize. And for any jackpot or Keno prize greater than $600, you have to mail in the ticket or cash it in person at one of the lottery payment centers in Wilsonville or Salem. And for video lottery, the cutoff is $1,250. And for all those tickets, the name, the resident city, the retailer that sold the ticket, they're all public record. And most of the truly large winners had one major jackpot, like the gentleman who won the $1.3 billion back in March. And we don't have those that frequently. But as it turns out, there were multiple individuals when you sorted this list who had cashed in hundreds and even thousands of big winning tickets over this 6-year period of time that we were looking at. And some were collecting millions of dollars in prizes. That's also been the case in a variety of other states, and academics, statisticians have even written scholarly papers about this phenomenon and determined that, given the odds of winning these games, this is statistically impossible. So in any case, I didn't know this at the time, but I'd racked and stacked this list of winners in a variety of ways and pretty quickly just went back to the lottery and said, hey, what's the deal here? We've got all these characters with thousands of winning tickets. They're winning millions of dollars a year in some cases. How is that possible? They were quite straightforward about it. Most of those folks are discounters. They're individuals who are buying winning lottery tickets from players at a significant discount to the prize value, and then they cash them in for for the prize value, and they take the difference as profit. So let's say you have a winning keynote ticket for $1,000. You can take that in to the payment center or mail it into the lottery and collect your prize, or you can sell it to a discounter for cash. Let's say, the discounter is willing to pay, and the prices vary. I think they're negotiable. They're depending maybe on your desperation at the moment to sell one of these things. But a $1,000 ticket, anywhere from $500 to $800. And then the discounter will go down and claim the prize in their own name, collect the winnings, pay the taxes, etc. The lottery knows, for the most part, who these folks are. They can't, the play is anonymous, so they don't know who originally won the prize. But, and in some of these instances, it's so obvious, and some of these folks are pawn shop owners. Some are just individuals who are operating this lucrative side hustle. And all the lottery employees in the payment centers know them as they're in there all the time. 3 times a week, these guys come in with, 15, 20 lottery tickets, big winners. The bars know who they are and, apparently recommend various discounters to players who want to sell their tickets.
And so explain, why would somebody take a discount? It's not like if you turn in the ticket, you got to wait 6 months to get your winnings. I mean, what is motivating them to shield their identity and take less money than they actually won?
So, I ended up talking to a bunch of these discounters, and they were very open about that. And the lottery, too, is very aware of, the reasons that these folks do this. Some of these folks just don't want anything to do with taxes. They don't want to be reporting these winnings. They might not, pay taxes at all. When you do win one of these big prizes, the state will do a background check, and it can garnish your winnings for past due child support or other debt to the state. Some folks want to avoid that. Some just have no ID or fixed address to send the winnings to. They don't have any transportation to get to a payment center. In a lot of parts of Oregon, it's hundreds of miles to go to Wilsonville or Salem, so it may be more convenient just to sell these things to a discounter. Some just don't want their spouse to know about the winnings. Maybe they're involved in the middle of divorce. They don't want to report this stuff. Really large prizes can affect your eligibility for Medicaid or Medicaid benefits. If you have to report that income, one very depressing reason is that, they want the cash immediately so they can keep gambling. Many of these folks are inveterate addicted players. What I'm told by, the people that are buying the tickets from them, and they want this cash immediately so they can keep on gambling.
And you said the lottery knows about this, and weren't they concerned about it? Didn't they make moves to try to eliminate this issue?
So, yes, they say they are concerned, but they haven't really done much about it. Again, they say the play is anonymous. This is legal in Oregon at this point. The lottery's known about the practice for years. They know it's problematic on several fronts. Again, it enables tax evasion. And we can talk more about that. Again, there's this past due child support and other debt that's being garnished. They said they were concerned about sketchy discounters being willing to manipulate honest winners into selling tickets, saying, for instance, that the lottery is going to verify your citizenship before paying up. That's not the case, but, there is potential for abuse of the winners. In other states, this has been tied to money laundering, with individuals using lottery and discounting to conceal the origin of some illicitly obtained money. But to some extent, the lottery's thrown up its hands about the problem. I quoted Matt Shelby, a spokesman for the agency, in the story, saying, we don't love this, but we don't even like it. But what do we do to curb this? They have taken one step. In other states, this practice has involved retailers, lottery retailers, where people will be coming back to the retailer where they either bought or just a random retailer and saying, "Hey, can you buy this back from me. And the retailer will end up purchasing it and either claiming it themselves or sending a runner to the payment center and doing that. So the state has passed rules that forbid retailers from discounting. And that's kind of hard to enforce in its own right because it's, you don't know immediately, the folks coming in, unless it's a frequent flyer down there at these payment centers, whether or not, some random individual is even connected or employed with a retailer. They know who the owners are and could check that fairly easily. But again, it's not hard to get around that prohibition.
So go back to the tax part. The state, when you cash a lottery ticket, the state takes out some taxes at the jump, right? You don't get the full amount. But how does this help somebody evade taxes?
So let's just say, when anyone claims a prize, excuse me, of $600 or more, the lottery issues what's called a W-2G for tax purposes. And for winners of more than $1,500, the state automatically withholds 8% in state income taxes. If you win more than $5,000, it withholds that 8% plus 24% in federal taxes. So let's say I have a $10,000 winning Keno ticket. If I present that to a payment center myself, the state's automatically going to withhold the 8%, the 24%, so 32% or $3,200 in taxes from that ticket. So I'm going to bring home my $6,800 in cash. And it turns out I may owe more than that when I file my taxes, depending on my income and my tax bracket, et cetera. If instead I decide, okay, I'm going to sell that to a discounter for 65 cents on the dollar, I'll get $6,500 in cash anonymously and immediately. No one checks if I owe child support or other debt. My spouse doesn't know. There's no impact on my reported earnings for the year. Then the person who buys that from me, the discounter, takes that to Salem. They receive the same $6,800 payout, but the individuals that I talked to told me that when it comes time to do their taxes, they also claim a tax deduction for the purchase price of the ticket. They actually collect documentation at that point and, have folks say, here's the prize, here's the number, here's the, sign this little sheet of paper. So they claim a tax deduction for the purchase price of the ticket. And then that example that we were talking about, so instead of Oregon taxing 8% of that $10,000 and receiving $800 in tax revenue on the ticket, the state's only taxing the $300 difference between the $6,800 that it pays out and the purchase price. So, it would generate far lesser tax revenue.
Interesting. So by the rules as they are written, the discounters are doing nothing illegal or wrong, and the original winners are doing nothing that is against the current rules.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it stacks up at the moment.
And to be clear, the original winners won fair and square, right? I mean, people are concerned about the integrity of lottery games. So nobody's cheating to win here.
No, this is all, above board. Again, you've got people pumping thousands and thousands of dollars into these machines all the time. And, they do eventually pump out some pretty big winnings as well. They're all legitimate. And again, anything below $600, you can just have it cashed out, or $1,250 for a video lottery ticket right at the bar. And again, above certain thresholds, you have to go down to Salem. And as it stands, this discounting scheme is not illegal.
And are there certain games where this is more of an issue, or is it all the games? You mentioned Keno and.
Yeah, it can be all the games, but it is, Keno and video lottery accounts for 93% of Oregon lottery revenues, and they, frequently pay out. So it's mostly an issue with video and Keno lottery tickets in Oregon. And, when you sort of calculate the odds, it's very difficult to say, compare these to some of the academic studies because this Keno and video lottery have such complicated odd schemes.
Mm-hmm.
But the academics I spoke to that were quite clear. This is statistically, it cannot happen. You would not end up with, this frequent a winner.
So once you had the list and you had these names, I mean, how did you track these guys down and get them to talk to you and share the system?
Well, that was pretty simple reporting, really. Their names and their cities were listed in the winners list that we got from the lottery. And I started calling them, and most of them were willing to talk to me because it's not illegal. And they just see it as a business opportunity that they'll take advantage of as long as they're able to. I met with one discounter from Vancouver who essentially operates out of his car, word of mouth. He's been doing it for more than a decade and told me he handed out thousands of business cards to individuals and to bartenders, over the years. And he offers bartenders a finder's fee when they refer a customer. And if he's not doing anything important that day, he says he can generally meet anyone within a winning ticket within 45 minutes around Portland. A bunch of the big discounters out there are pawn shop owners. I spoke to one in Central Point, north of Medford, who had purchased and claimed $2.3 million worth of tickets in the previous year. And she said people, they come from the coast, they come from Central Oregon, hundreds of miles to sell their tickets. And she said, we don't make a lot of money on this, but a little bit on a lot adds up. And again, they were all pretty straightforward. What's the problem? They know me. They know I'm doing this. Yeah.
Well, as a journalist, we are in favor of government transparency. If we didn't have that law, if Oregon did not require the names of winners to be public, we would never have known that this was going on. So I'm really happy that the public records law worked as it was intended to do. And I'm glad we're one of the 22 states that require that lottery winners come forward by name. Now, things may change, it sounds like, after your article published. Tell us a little bit about the reaction and what happened.
Well, so we did, again, this is an issue around the country, and we did check with a variety of other states about what it is that they do about this. And some are far more aggressive in trying to curtail this practice. And Texas law, for instance, makes it a felony for a prize winner to sell their right to claim a prize, or a discounter to claim the prize of another winner. California also bans the assignment of winners' interests in their prize to somebody else, regardless of the reason. And if it determines the claimant isn't the winner, they can reject the claim. Other states have a practice of investigating frequent winners and suspending their prize claiming privileges or denying claims. Georgia does that when the winner can't prove when or where they bought a winning ticket, or if they fail to disclose a relationship with the shop owners. Massachusetts investigates anyone who claims 20 or more prizes or more of $1,000 in a year, and they suspend the prize claiming privileges that if they find that these are factually or statistically improbable, they cut off the spigot. Oregon considered a similar rule to Massachusetts last year, but I guess they decided that they were going to hold off because they were concerned it was going to be too costly to enforce and ineffective. Maybe these folks would just employ more runners. But we did reach out to a variety of lawmakers that sit on the gambling regulation committee in the House and Senate. And they universally said, we were completely unaware that this was the case. And, we need to stop this. It's difficult to say how widespread the practice is, but we also talked to the head of the Child Support Enforcement Division here, and she said, adamantly, I want to close this loophole. If I collect $100 for a family that hasn't seen payments in a while, that's real money. We should get on this. again, the governor's office, and from the governor's office to, legislative leaders told us that they wanted to take this up during legislative days in September. They couldn't move anything till next year, but they want to consider how to shut this loophole.
Really terrific reporting, and we'll keep an eye on the next session of the legislature, which starts in early 2025, and see whether lawmakers are able to be successful at closing this loophole exposed by exclusive reporting from the Oregonian Oregon Live's Watchdog team. With that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. Tell a friend, help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism and stories like this one is with a subscription to Oregon Live. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.
Popsicles, sprinklers, a cool breeze. Talk about refreshing. You know what else is refreshing this summer? A brand new phone with Verizon. Yep, get a new phone on any plan with Select Phone Trade-in and My Plan. And lock down a low price for 3 years on any plan with My Plan. This is a deal for everyone, whether you're a new or existing customer. Swing by Verizon today for our best phone deals. 3-year price guarantee applies to then current base monthly rate only. Additional terms and conditions apply for all offers.